Hello, I'm Rob Illingworth, a Community History Officer in the Kent Archives team at the Kent History and Library Centre, Maidstone. To help celebrate the 75th anniversary of VE Day, my colleagues and I are going to read extracts from 1945 personal diary entries, local newspaper articles, parish magazine items, and local government literature. All of these items describe the experiences of VE Day and VJ Day in Kent, and they're held in our Kent Archive and Local History collections. I think that the diary entry that Walter Wenday of Hadlow wrote on the 8th of May 1945 is a good summary of what VE Day meant to the British people of his time. Tuesday, the 8th of May 1945. It is peace again in Europe. Germany has surrendered unconditionally by land, air and sea. Today is VE Day, the day for which British people have fought and endured for 5 years, 8 months and 4 days of war. The vapour trails of the Battle of Britain, the moan of the sirens, the crack of the guns, the crump of the bombs of the V1 and V2, the organ phrases of Churchill, the miracles of Dunkirk, the great victories of the Royal Navy, the Desert Army, the glorious 8th under Alexander and Montgomery. For Mr. Churchill, this historic day marks the happy climax of his great premiership. VE Day is in large measure Churchill's day. Walter Wenday was born at Hadlow in 1880. He was deaf, and I think he narrowly avoided being conscripted to serve in the First World War, and he became a boot and shoemaker in Hadlow. VE Day, or V-Day as it was also known, had been anticipated for some time. This is reflected in an item in the High Holden Parish Magazine dated the 23rd of April 1945, and in a letter written on the 4th of May by the Dartford Borough electrical engineer.
P164-28-6-8 High Holden Parish Magazine. Director Reverend A.B. Champion, M.A. St George's Day, the 23rd of April 1945. On V-Day, we hope that every available ringer will be ready to come at a moment's notice. The proposal is this. If the announcement is made in the morning, then the bells are to be rung at 12 o'clock and followed by a short service of thanksgiving at 12:30. If the announcement is in the afternoon, then the respective times will be 6 o'clock and 6:30. We all long for this day to come soon, but not before all serious fighting is really over. Even then, we shall have abundant cause for soberness. Letter from the Dartford Borough Electrical Engineer addressed to J. James Hurtley, Dartford Town Clerk, the 4th of May, 1945. Dear Sir, VE Day floodlighting. I have this afternoon been informed by Sergeant Gosling of the Dartford Police that no lights other than those allowed under the present dim-out conditions will be permitted in the Borough of Dartford on VE Day. We have made up an illuminated V sign, and all preparations have been made for illuminating the bandstand at short notice. But owing to the instructions received from the police, I am not proceeding any further at present. Yours faithfully, Reginald Daw, Borough Electrical Engineer.
On the day before VE Day, William Ernest Daw of Sevenoaks and his wife Ella reminisced about the emergency actions they planned after Britain declared war on Sunday the 3rd of September 1939.
Diary of William Ernest Daw, Insurance Clerk, Sevenoaks resident. Monday the 7th of May 1945. Strolled with Ella in Knowle, and I recalled the Sunday in which war was declared, when we sat under a tree in Knowle discussing the arrangement for Ella and the boys' journey to her friend Sybil's farm near Chippenham. when, on this evening of Mondays, the 7th of May 1945, I returned my fire warden's helmet to Crouch, the gardener to Mr. Johnston. He met me cordially. He had just heard that the Germans have unconditionally surrendered and that the PM will broadcast at 3 tomorrow, and that tomorrow and Wednesday are holidays.
The Reverend Harry James Bayliss was rector of Wooldham during the Second World War and kept a detailed diary. His notes on the progress and resolution of the war are mainly derived from radio and newspaper reports. There's also a lot of personal and local detail in his diaries. The tower of Wooldham Rectory had been hit during a 1941 air raid, and Harry Bayliss and his sister Gertrude were forced to adjust to life in a bomb-damaged house. Bayliss's May 1945 diary entries give a lively impression of the sudden changes that VE Day brought to everyday existence in a small Medway village. We also have photographs of Bayliss and his dog, Little Ben, celebrating the end of the war.
Tuesday, the May the 8th, VE Day itself. One of the greatest days in the history of the world. The weather today has been perfect. May Day, very warm and sun all day, but the atmosphere has been oppressive. The celebrations in the quiet seclusion of the drawing room, where we have sat so many times during the intervals between air raids and where we were sleeping when the house was blitzed, we listened to BBC broadcasts giving eyewitness accounts of what was going on. From Wooldham Rectory, just had time to hear Mr. Churchill's announcement at 3 p.m. and then hurried off to the recreation ground at the far end of the village, the better part of a mile away. Found no one there, but I passed a good many people and children going the other way to the camp, where Officer Commanding had arranged to have a football match, also at 3:30. It was 4 p.m. before about 20 of the younger children collected and a half circle of adults, mostly elderly. It was a miserable business waiting there in front of the goalposts, where the service was held, until the last stragglers arrived. However, at length I was able to begin, all standing, no seats for the elderly, urchins sprawling on the grass, and the village dogs threading in and out. Nor were any hymn books provided except a few for the school children. I wore my college cape and my bands, which I have not done since the war began. Little Ben had his red, white and blue victory bow on his neck when I took him out for exercise this morning. At 6:30 I held my service in church. It was a great success. The church was full, people sang very well, used a modified form from the service which had been authorised for use immediately upon the cessation of the war. Note the clock striking and chimes at church put on this morning after being silent since beginning of the war. I think I preached a good sermon. Church wardens very pleased. Collection for the schools 1, 5 and 8. People's warden only man in uniform, that of a special constable, except for a couple of soldiers from the camp. When I came back we had tea. I had made bread and some bread cakes in a coal oven for the first time. Hot cakes fine. Note, the flag hoisted on the church this morning blew very fine from Hull out of the tower. Wednesday, May the 9th, 1945. VE plus 1 day. Wooldham Rectory. Heard by chance this morning that Commandant at camp had arranged sports and a tea for the school children. The head teacher of the school passed me on the road this morning when I knew nothing, but he knew yesterday. Told me nothing as before. Should not have known if I had not afterwards gone to see the Commandant of camp to invite him and the men to church on Sunday. So I went to the sports and the tea. Never did I see such an abundance of food at a tea party. Plenty of fruit cake and lashings of butter, things civilians can't get only in very meagre quantities. Cheese too, good cheese, and lots of it, and plenty of jam. I got my Whittington chimes clock going today, it has been packed away for safety since the house was blitzed 4 years ago, almost exactly. Thursday, May the 10th, 1945, Ascension Day. Waldron Rectory. For the first time this week, letters were delivered this morning. The petrol ration. There will be a basic allowance of petrol in less than a month's time for all owners of licensed cars. So far as it concerns us, we will get 4 gallons a month for a 9 horsepower car. We are then back to the position in which we were before it was necessary to apply the District Petroleum Officer for coupons to get petrol, which he would only grant for professional and essential purposes. A log had to be kept of all journeys made. Perhaps we shall be freed from the fear of being stopped and questioned by the police, and perhaps fined for some trifling infringement of the regulations. Saturday, May the 12th, 1945, Waldron Rectory. Now the air raids are past and over, and there will be no more flying bombs or rockets either. And we can show a light upstairs where we had no blackout since it was destroyed when the house was blitzed 4 years ago. We have moved the beds upstairs and intend to sleep there tonight. We have also had a very small portion of whisky each, and the toast was the end of the raids. We also felt we could risk going to Maidstone in the car, and we pulled up in the avenue leading to Moat Park and had a little lunch as we stood parked under a lime tree, quite in the old style.
Kent local newspaper reports, often accompanied by cheery photographs of street parties, give a vivid impression of the VE Day celebrations in all corners of the county. These reports are sometimes tempered by more sombre reflections on the horrific destruction and losses of the war.
Never in its history has Kent witnessed such memorable scenes as it did on Tuesday, the long-awaited VE Day. Nature opened the day with a thunderous victory salute. Then the dark clouds swept away and the morning was kissed by the sun. The crowds were astir early. They came out in their thousands and they were full of rejoicing. It seemed as if almost everyone sported a red, white and blue rosette. Red, white and blue. It was astonishing where it all had come from. Girls had blouses and skirts made from Union Jacks. Men wore red, white and blue tam o' shanters. Even cats and dogs had necklaces of red, white and blue, while horses had loincloths made of Union flags. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, thousands of people carrying flags and cheering gathered outside the town hall for the mayor, Alderman C. Gordon Larkin, to make the official peace announcement. There was wild cheering when the band of the Queen's Own Royal West Kent Regiment turned from Week Street into the High Street. Following them were soldiers carrying the flags of the United Nations, escorted by an armed guard. The cannon fired again. Soldiers, sailors and airmen formed a gun team for the cannon in the High Street to precision drill. Large crackers were used as ammo, and the effect was most realistic. A minute's silence was observed in Maidstone Police Court, which sat on VE Day. Church wardens and sidesmen were unable to cope with the hundreds of people who attended a Thanksgiving service in All Saints Church, Maidstone, on VE night. The climax of an unforgettable day at Maidstone came at midnight when thousands of people waited for the official end of hostilities at half a minute past the hour, and then sang Auld Lang Syne. No town in Kent was more gaily decorated than Gravesend for the peace celebrations. Not only was every street, particularly in the town centre, bedecked with flags and bunting, but the main streets, the clock tower and public buildings were decorated with many garlands of red, white and blue wax paper threaded in the strands of rope. Many among the crowds thronging the town asked themselves when it was that they had seen garlands like this before, and thereby hangs a tale, for no one can buy paper like this these days. After the coronation celebrations in 1937, a large quantity of coloured wax paper was left over, was stored away in vaults in the fort gardens and almost forgotten. A few days before VE Day, corporation officials remembered it and dug it out. Members of the Warden Service voluntarily set to work to make the garlands. Then corporation workmen also voluntarily undertook to erect them. In other ways too, Gravesend shone. On the summit of Windmill Hill flew the flags of the four great allies, Great Britain, the USA, Russia and China, and after dark these were floodlit. Floodlights also illuminated churches and other public buildings. 10,000 people were at Woodlands Park, Gravesend, to watch the burning of the huge bonfire and the torchlight procession. And the bonfire was lit half an hour before schedule by a devil-may-care sailor. Quieter than a normal bank holiday, that was how Sittingbourne and Milton spent VE Day. A spirit of sombre thanksgiving, rather than any wild rejoicing, was everywhere apparent. Almost every house was decorated. High at the head of one garden line pole was a broom, signifying that once again the British Navy had swept the enemy from the seven seas. But it was Mill Street which took the eye. Strings of bunting and flags stretched across from house to house. Suspended in mid-air, interspersed with the red, white and blue, were colourful items of ladies' lingerie. It was the attraction of the day, said the residents. At Batchild, young highwaymen stopped motorists to collect for a children's victory tea.
The Thanet Advertiser, Tuesday 8th of May 1945. Living under the direct threat of attack for nearly 6 years, the people of Thanet had as much reason for rejoicing as any in the country when VE Day dawned, and rejoice they did. In Ramsgate in particular, there were scenes which those who witnessed them will carry in their memories for the remainder of their days. They will be memories of the town decorated as it had never been before, of great masses of people with bowed heads giving thanks to God for a merciful deliverance, of surging, cheering throngs of thousands of men, women and children looking down on the colourful panorama of the harbour as sirens rent the air and drowned even the sound of church bells. Most people in Ramsgate stayed at home to hear the statement broadcast by the Prime Minister from Downing Street at 3 p.m. No sooner had the statement finished than the wireless was almost drowned by foghorns, klaxon horns, whistles and sirens from the ships in the harbour. As though lured by the Pied Piper's whistle, people came flocking from their houses and ran or briskly walked along the streets leading to the front. Soon the inclined roads and promenades overlooking the harbour, with all its gaily decorated ships, were packed with people. The church bells were ringing, but could scarcely be heard above the paean of joy from the ships. Conversation was almost impossible, and in the intervals, when the stokers were getting up more steam, people found themselves shouting at each other. Ack-ack guns joined in the chorus, but this time it was not necessary to duck down, as black puffs of smoke pinpointed the shell bursts in the bright blue sky.
Kentish Times, May the 11th, 1945. Relief and thanksgiving were the prominent notes in the celebration of VE Day in Dartford, Crayford and the districts. Festivities commenced with street teas for children, and Alderman Ward, Deputy Mayor, paid a visit to Waldeck Road, where one had been organised in a few hours. In a few words to the children, he expressed the regret of all that Alderman Blackman, Dartford's wartime mayor, had not been spared to see the day, and also the hope that the children present would never again have such festivities against the background of war with all its loss, sorrow and destruction. Lights up, illuminated VE sign. As darkness drew on, determination to avenge the blackout years was in evidence, and floodlighting and searchlight installations produced striking effects. Floodlighting in Dartford was switched on by Councillor Taylor, chairman of the Electricity Committee, and his little daughter Pat Taylor had the distinction of putting the illuminations of the bandstand in Central Park into operation. An illuminated V sign at the entrance to the park, designed by Mr. Robinson of the Electricity Departments, was the most effective feature of the decorations.
Kent Messenger, Friday the 11th of May 1945. In a conflicting mood, gay yet solemn, carefree but thoughtful, Canterbury celebrated victory. Public houses remained open until late on VE Day, and there was plenty of laughter and singing. But there were Thanksgiving services and tears too. There were huge bonfires on the blitzed site of the Payne Smith School, Longport Street, several in the Vauxhall Avenue area, Northgate and elsewhere. And effigies of Hitler were burning all over the city. On VE Day Eve, miners for Chislett, mostly Bevin boys, and the men of the forces stationed nearby, with arms linked, walked up and down the high street singing. The miners sang, "When this weary war is over, no more digging coal for me." And the soldiers, "No more soldiering for me." Then, with the cathedral bells ringing, came VE Day.
The VJ Day celebrations of August 1945 are also covered in great detail by local newspapers. But after reading this item from the Thanet Advertiser, Tuesday the 21st of August 1945, I think we'll return to the diaries held in Kent Archives for some more personal accounts.
The Thanet Advertiser, Tuesday 21st of August 1945. Mr. R. A. Hyams of Prazoilva, Westgate Bay Avenue, Westgate, was the first person in Britain to receive the Japanese offer of surrender. A member of the BBC monitoring service, he was officially off duty on the 10th of August, but as it was thought likely that a message would be received from Japan, he consented to an extra turn of duty from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. At 12:51 p.m, Mr. Hyams picked up a message from a known Japanese wavelength, which stated that the Japanese government would be prepared to surrender, provided His August Majesty the Emperor retained his sovereign rights. The message was instantly flashed to 10 Downing Street, to Washington, and to the BBC in London, where it was in time for the 1 p.m. news bulletin.
The All British Desk Diary for 1945. Author Alfred Edmund Johnson. Alfred Edmund Johnson, 1882 to 1968, was a confectioner with a shop on Palace Street in Canterbury. Wednesday the 15th of August. On 7 o'clock news, heard of the great news of peace. Was given at midnight last night. Attlee gave the news. Everyone happy, and the youngsters pestered me for fireworks. A showery day, only opened the shop till 1:40. Short of goods. I heard a great noise in the night, but never thought it might be peace, as they dilly-dallied a lot. Took a stroll at 9. city packed. Soldiers mad with joy. Not so much excitement as VE Day. Found every pub packed, though many closed through lack of beer. Yet teetotalers get nothing. I have had no minerals for 3 weeks, but pubs hardly miss having beer. Thursday, 16th of August. Opened till 2 p.m. and closed early for a rest. A fine day. Great excitement tonight. Soldiers tore up street defences and made bonfires on ruined sites. They hanged on the back of buses and got buckshy rides on private cabs unnoticed by drivers. Singing crowds. Cathedral and Tower Gardens floodlit. Both lovely, especially the former. More excitement tonight. Fireworks everywhere. Pubs packed. What a lot of women drinking.
Diary of William Ernest Dorr, Wednesday the 15th of August 1945. End of war. At 8, Ella, the boys and I went through the town thick with flags and walked down the lane to Knoll Paddock, crowded with people coming down from the bonfire to the Vine. We stood for a long time watching the great bonfire. Such a variety of colours, a lovely little girl in a long white dress with a tiara strolling here and there. Squibs falling scattered the groups. Sometimes I looked away at the tall calm trees of the quiet sky, fairy lamps up the lane to the Vine, whither we went to watch the fireworks. Then home, through the high street lit with fairy lamps part of the way. One end of the high street very quiet until the soldiers and girls came away from the Royal Oak taps.
And here's a final word from the diary of Dr. Bernard Billings of Folkestone. It comes from the Kent History and Library Centre reference U2540/F2, which are catalogued as the personal diaries and papers of Dr. R.B. Billings, 1901 to 1983. Dr. Bernard Billings was born in 1883 and, after qualifying as a physician, lived and practised in Folkestone for many years before emigrating to Australia in 1964, where he celebrated his 100th birthday. The 5 volumes of diaries are of great interest. They include not only comments on his own life and his family, but also notes on national events. Many photographs illustrate the text, highlighting Dr. Billings' interest in history, genealogy and architecture. The 16th of August 1945. On this day I felt the urge to jubilate, which resulted in me being invited up the church tower of the Church of the Annunciation in Chislehurst to ring the bells which had been prevented by law from ringing during the long war years. And in spite of the fact that I had not handled a bell for well nigh 40 years, found I had not lost the art.
In May 2020, 75 years on from VE Day, we're in a battle for the health of the nation. So I do feel a pang when I read about the people of Kent coming together to give thanks for the end of a terrible war. But hearing these voices of local people who'd overcome trauma and upheaval also gives me hope for the future. We look forward to the happy day when, once again, we can share our archive and local history collections with you in person.